Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello everyone and welcome along to the RTÉ GAA podcast. We are looking back on the weekend of the league with Enda McGinley, and fair to say, a couple of spicy encounters to look back on with myself and Rory as well. Let's give you the results from Division 1 and then we'll sort of pick through a couple of them. Donegal, 21 points. Armagh, 110. Definitely a big one to get stuck into. Mayo beat Tyrone. Maybe Tyrone in a bit of bother, 12 points to 10. Kerry 115, Dublin 19 points. A huge win for the Dubs in Tralee, and Derry 16 points, Galway 113. Let's start with what a lot of people probably billed as the weekend game with the visit of the Dubs going down to Tralee. And I think because it was like Saturday night, under the TV, under the lights, there was like such razzmatazz around it. I think when you saw that the Dubs were 11 points down at halftime, I'm not sure if anybody thought it was going to be as tight and as brilliant a second half as it ended up being.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things, is getting used to what is a big lead and what's not a big lead.
Yeah.
Particularly when there's a strong win. So you did know from previous games that comebacks from further behind are definitely more on now with the new rules. It certainly gives teams more opportunities, both to rack up the scores, and also it decreases the ability of the likes of Kerry just to shut the game down, to block their own defence. So on both sides, the new rules sort of allow a team that's chasing the game the opportunity to do so, and the wind benefits that massively. But you still didn't really see where it was coming from, because Dublin seemed to be well off it, struggling in midfield, and of course the whole narrative was going to be, right, well, you've got your James McCarthy and your Fenton issue, and this is going to be the big thing coming out of it. But to be fair, they rallied brilliantly in the second half and were well worth it. But brilliant crowd, really good game. I think we seen the various aspects of the rules over the weekend, but I think both teams will be happy enough with where they're at right now. Kerry will be a wee bit worried. They need to get a few more points on the board, but it's that sort of mid-league section at the minute where in the next couple of weeks things will become much clearer.
I actually think Enda's right. It's not necessarily about either of those teams, Rory. It was actually more about the wildness of the game. That, like, suddenly with all the 2-pointers, you know, you have no idea, when are you safe? When is the game okay to sit back?
Yeah, the 2-pointer is it's definitely a bit of a wild card in the rules. I think it gives, like what Enda said, in terms of you can't sit on 8, 9, 10-point leads anymore, which is it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Like, look, I suppose from a Kerry perspective, they only scored 3 points in the second half.
Yeah.
That's not good enough, and they'll know that. I mean, 2 of them, okay, 2 from play, 1 and a free. You know, I got a sense that when Gainey scored that goal just before half time, was there a little bit of complacency insofar as job done now? There's no way they're coming back from this. You know, I think it'll definitely sting, given how new a lot of the Dublin players were. There was a whole change of personnel. It's a really new Dublin team, and I think a victory like this on the road on a bad night away to a really tough traditional opponent, for the likes of the Larkin O'Dells and Luke Brennocks and, you know, Greg McEnany's, Theo Clancy's, these are the guys that I think will start to grow into the jersey now. And I think it's a little bit worrying for everybody else that if they start to establish themselves and start to generate that belief and that life again, you know, you could be looking at a new iteration of Dublin very, very quickly. They still have a few issues. I think midfield is certainly an area where they probably need to look at. The kick out now is just the kick out. Like, I saw it particularly in club games as well. I watched a few of them. Having a good midfielder is important, but also having a goalkeeper that can bomb the ball into the opponent's half of the field is massive now. And I think from Dublin's perspective, I'd say Desi came away absolutely buzzing. I think this really sets them up now to go on. You know, they may tiptoe through the rest of the league. I don't think they will. I think they'll get a real good burst and a real good, they'll get a real good burst of energy from this. And yeah, it's a little bit worrying for everybody else.
What's your sense, Enda, of where Dublin are?
They are in a difficult place, I think, because whenever you have such a changeover of established players, like, and we're not just talking about your normal, like, every team has sort of lost some older players, and that's part of the natural turning of the wheel. But it's the players that Dublin have lost, and then not only that, but the level of expectation and the level of achievement that those new players have to somehow measure up to. So I think that's exceptionally difficult. I think in Desi, they've the right man in charge. His work with the under-20s, under-21s when he was there, the fact that he's well used to working with those younger players, I think younger players will feel confident that he knows what the level is, what is their appropriate level coming in. I think, strangely, the changeover in the new rules and that whole throwing of the game into a big state of flux, and the fact, as you were mentioning, the ability to manage a game, the ability to control game, the ability just through sheer ruthless, boring sort of decision making to strangle the life of a game or the life of an opponent, because all of those things are gone, and those things are probably some of the most experience linked elements to top teams, because those are much reduced in the new rules. I think that gives a new young team like Dublin a chance, but at the same stage, come the bigger tests on down the line, in terms of the quality that they have, and in terms of those match winning players, the ability to stand up in the really big moments, until your players go through that process, you really don't know what you have. So Dublin are a good team. They're going to be one of the top 7-8 teams in the country. If things go right for them, they'll be thereabouts. I think they're coming through a province where there's a couple of teams starting to show as if they're making progress now. I think some more local provincial competition will really help them bed in, because where other teams get a really good testing in the provincial championships, Dublin have lacked that in the previous years. I think they need that test. The league is a good stepping stone, but from my point of view, Dublin are in a challenging time because of the sheer quality of the players that they've lost, and those players stepping up have big shoes to fill. But the new rules and everything else certainly gives a freshness and an openness and a strangeness to the game that actually suits the team in that phase.
Yeah, totally agree. I guess the other thing we probably saw this weekend, Rory, was we were waiting to see David Clifford coming back. We saw Michael Murphy come back. I think once you start seeing the stars of your game and how they're adapting to it, I think maybe that was one of the other things that certainly I was waiting for this weekend. And well, Michael Murphy certainly returned with a bit of a bang, didn't he?
Yeah, he certainly did. Zinedine Farker, as they're saying now, I think, on social media. It was great to see Clifford come on. I think he will, like, it was his first day out, so it was very difficult. It's going to take a while for him to just sort of bed and get up to speed, I think. But it was like, I mean, the buzz when he was coming on, the noise that it created, and then likewise in Ballybuffet when Murphy came on, it was just a noise, and what a crowd. The crowds, that's the other thing actually, Jacqui, which I think is very encouraging, which I presume is a factor with the new rules. And now, look, people might say the attendances at National League games have always been strong anyway, and that is fair, but they may have started to wane a little bit in recent years. But particularly Championship, we know, is way down. So look, that test is still yet to come. But the crowds this weekend were just absolutely outstanding. Like Armagh, and I know, look, and that will probably have a little bit of skin in the game here in relation to the Antrim situation and the standoff that's currently ongoing. But when you see the size of the support that Armagh can bring up to Donegal, Donegal it's a good spin, and the size of the crowd that they brought. I mean, Ballybuffet, I think, was actually full. It's just it's very encouraging, and it adds a fantastic sense of atmosphere, and it certainly contributed, I'd say, to a certain extent to how's it going from Ian Farker when Michael Murphy came on.
Yeah, I think it was always going to add a layer of how the Donegal move on? How do they how do they evolve generally, Enda? But I do think he definitely has found a way, Jim McGuinness, in adapting the rules to make his team even better. But when you bring somebody like that back into the fold, just Rory's so right. The roof nearly kind of lifted again. People in Donegal were saying, right, okay, now we have another layer to a brilliant team.
Absolutely. And it was just even his three main bits that he hit: his left-footed point, the right-footed point where he just came off the arc, and you could just see him in that wee bit of added space in there. He's such a tough person to mark. We didn't see a direct long ball into him, which is going to be an option too. And then that field that he took in the middle where he was all over the place early, eyes on the ball, managed to control it down with one hand. It was remarkable. Of course, the sending off then as well sort of added to it. So it was certainly Michael Murphy strikes you as a fella that would love things low key. There was nothing low key about his reintroduction anyway. It was very much here comes the man.
Yeah, sure. I think Brian Towers even said in the commentary, "Ta Henri Arash," the king is back. Like, I mean,
No,
it doesn't get more hyperbolic.
But it's brilliant to see. But you're right. The crowds that are at these games again down in Tralee, it was practically a full house. I was at the Tyrone Armagh game, and it was pretty much a full house. Like, you wouldn't have put any more in it if you sold every ticket. So I don't know how the ticket situation is going, and certainly Ballybuffet looked like that too. But in terms of Donegal, like our Armagh are playing well at the minute, and they did not play poorly in Ballybuffet. But the intensity with which Donegal are bringing to this game, their fitness levels, like the whole ability or how you sit off with your 11 players back and how much you chase the game if the opponent takes up another player, that's one of the biggest things we're seeing from a coaching or management point of view in the game to date. But Donegal simply went at it through sprinting and chasing that ball down. Whenever they were on it, they chased and they just trusted that somebody else was coming back in. So we seen fellas sitting, maybe they were sitting in the D and the ball was out the left hand flank underneath the stand. It was switched over to free men who were standing out roughly at the arc. And the deeper lying Donegal defenders just sprinted straight out automatically. As soon as they seen that switches on, you're only doing that, you're leaving a man in a much more dangerous position. You're only doing that if you're trusting and assuming that somebody else is covering you. And that is all only happening because they know the wrath that stands on the sideline. Obviously, if somebody is shown on a video clip to not be covering somebody else. So you can just sense the intensity. We know Donegal have been back early. You cannot build those levels of fitness without a significant amount of work under the legs. You'd be so prone to injury if you're trying to come into that level of intensity that they're playing with without a very, very significant body of work in the legs. And they have obviously done that, and they're backing themselves. So they were immensely impressive, particularly their defensive work. Their forward work is slick, and I think will only get better. But their defensive work, their aerial ability in midfield, patterns, kickouts, they have a lot going for them.
Oh, they certainly do. They certainly do. I'm loving Donegal, Jacqui.
Me too.
And I know that people might say, look, Derry were in a similar situation this time last year where they
Mayo the year before, wasn't it?
Where they stormed
really
exactly stormed through the league, and then people were kind of questioning whether or not they would have the ability to sustain it. And look, we know that from Donegal's perspective, particularly, it's like, in fairness to a Dublin or a Kerry, maybe less so in Connacht, but certainly Dublin and Kerry, they can pull the handbrake up a wee bit once they get to the provincial championships, and they can take that little mid-season break. You can't do that really in the Ulster Championship, and you could find yourself out in your backside fairly quickly. So it's a long season to try and sustain the levels that they're at currently, but you wouldn't back against them being able to do it. And
do you not think, though, that this is a man who's come from a professional environment, and maybe he has planned this and he thinks we actually can do this?
That's the point. I think he will have a huge amount of knowledge around the physiological load, around what is feasible for them at different times. I mean, look, the reality is, 2 more wins, they're probably in a league final. Now, do they want to make a league final? We all know the Division 1 league final, is a little bit of a curate's egg. So you're not entirely sure where their motivations might lie as they get deeper into the campaign. I think to a certain extent, though, because of the new rules and because you've got to stress test these new rules as much as you can, a lot of the teams have been going very, very hard early on, just simply because they're trying to figure their way out. If you're coming into a major experiment, it's very hard to temper how your approach to it and not get a better handle on it. So I think they have to kind of go, and all the teams have been going full on hammer and tongs the whole way so far. But it will be very interesting to see how how this measures now as they go on. But I mean, they have so many, like the conditioning, as Enda said, their collective defense, the way they attack in numbers, the spread of scores, the pace they have in their team. They have a goalkeeper that, has a laser-like kick out. They've got the iconic player coming back, the mood in the camp, everything, the messages. I mean, there's a convey where they train, and I'd imagine the buzz there even if you could see over the famous fence, I'd say the buzz would be fantastic in training.
I think apparently you get a strong buzz if you touch the fence, but
yeah, it's to keep the cows out. But like it's no, but like they're great to watch. Ryan. Do you know what's very interesting though? And like only 18 months ago, and Donegal are very curious on this front. Like only 18 months ago, they crashed and burned in the Division 1 league after winning their first game. I think they lost the following 6 afterwards and were relegated, or following 7 games or 6 games, and were relegated and had a terrible championship. And here they are, less than 18 months later, with largely the same personnel, and they are right in the mix as All-Ireland contenders from this juncture.
Yeah. Listen, I definitely think they've been the team to watch so far, and I think beating the last 3 All-Ireland champions probably says it for itself.
Their first 3 league games,
weeks,
their first 3 league games, that's some going now.
It's quite a statement. What about at the other end? Because I think looking at Mayo Tyrone at the weekend, and everybody felt like it's very early on for it to be a relegation decider, but you certainly felt like whoever lost that game was putting themselves under serious pressure. You would feel now, in that situation that Tyrone find themselves in, their backs are a little bit to the wall over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, the win first day out against Derry feels a long time ago. Like it's just amazing how quickly things change in the league, and our own narratives change within the league. But again, I think there's a pinch of salt to be taken with all of that. You've got a bunch of teams now sitting on 2 points. You don't really know where a lot of those teams are. Certainly Tyrone, for me, when you look at the intensity that Armagh brought in their game against Tyrone, that Donegal and Armagh played at yesterday, that even Kerry and Dublin played at, I haven't seen that intensity in Tyrone yet. They were sort of there against Derry, but Tyrone aren't hitting anywhere near top gear. Again, I don't know what training is happening there at the minute and how they're sort of tailoring it. And we know that they've obviously Argyll players to come back into it as well. That will certainly help, particularly up front, where I thought against Mayo, looking another day, they would have come out of Castlebar winning that for me by 2 or 3 points. And the narrative then swings to a completely different level. But
in a county like Tyrone, though, Enda, like that's a huge thing to be able to bring back the likes of the players that you've had in that club for the last couple of months. Like that, they're complete game changers.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the new rules too, in terms of their shooting ability, and the ball winning ability in midfield, I think they will bring something back. But like there's Tyrone players at the minute there, and they're just a wee bit off colour. The Tyrone team, it's just not clicking fully, but they still created chances to go and win that game, and for me they should have won that game. And again, if they did, the narrative then is very, very different. They're sitting top half the table, if you know what I mean. So I certainly wouldn't be panicking yet. The one problem for them is, if you're looking at the table and separating the stronger informed teams and the other teams at the minute, Tyrone are facing into a run now of the stronger informed teams.
Kerry next.
Which means points are going to be even harder to get on the board. So yeah, it's difficult. They've been there before, but look, I don't think the drop to Division 2, if that was to happen, I don't think it's as big an issue as it has been in previous years. I think the fact that last year's All-Ireland final sort of showed that as well. Armagh, Donegal, we've seen there's two teams very recently in Division 2, and they're not exactly struggling at the minute. So there is 10 teams for me there at the minute that are all top quality sides, and they can all have significant impacts in Championship. The direct link between league level and performance and Championship has been weakening over the past several years. So it's not just as critically important, but you want to see a bit of form. You want to sense that the team is heading the right direction. So league position aside, it's that sense of getting up to the pace of the new game and getting a real handle on it and starting to hit into a wee bit of form, both individually and collectively. And Tyrone just aren't there yet, but it doesn't take a huge amount to change that.
Give me a sense of that balancing act of trying to get the lads back who've obviously just been playing in an All-Ireland club final and they need their rest. And like you as their club manager are the first person to say, okay, yeah, they need a break. But equally, I'm sure they're obviously involved in college teams as well. They're wanting to try to balance everything. But I'm sure they're watching from the outside and going, geez, Tyrone could really do with us here. And we've got a run of a couple of weeks where we need to get something against some of the best teams out there. Like that balance has to be a really hard one to strike.
Yeah, absolutely. And funny, I was thinking of it too. Obviously, I didn't know. I had been chatting to Malachy about it, but I didn't know how long he would, how much rope he would give the boys. To be honest, I think he's played it very well. I think knowing the nature of those boys, the first week they definitely wouldn't have been in a position to play at all. The second week, the manager could have, and plenty would have put them under a bit of pressure to play, and they would have known the guys that they are. They would have went back and said, okay, well, we'll have to go back. And they would have went back feeling as if they're being sort of really put out for the team. Third week, they would have went back. Manager asked them back. They would have went back and been ready to play, but they still would have felt we're being very dedicated here for the team. But the longer it goes on, they're now thinking, hang on a minute, why the hell is this man not looking us back in? You know what I mean? So as a player, you'd be thinking, here, hang on a minute, start playing us. What the hell are you at? So I would imagine within the next week or two, those boys will be not only wanting to get back in and playing again, but feeling as if they want to prove themselves, and sort of, this man seems to be building a team and quite happy to keep going here, building a team without us. And suddenly then those players want to come back in and very much prove a point, and they're hungry and fresh and ready to go. So given the length of season ahead, given the level of players that he's looking at and bringing in, I think Malachy has played that absolutely fine. Tyrone have really good players. Malachy has a lot of players to get looking at properly. And the fact that he's those players down means he can look at the other players. He knows the Errigal players well enough. He'll have ideas for them, their role or their potential role or whatever, where they are in the pecking order. He'll have a brave idea of that anyway. So he's a lot of ground to get under the feet in terms of the 30, 40 players, good quality players that he has to somehow sift in his head and see where they're all fitting together.
Yeah. Look, I think they're probably one of those teams, Rory, that just need to find something over the next couple of weeks. They're not the only ones, by the way, because like it is going to be a bit of a race to the bottom with several teams, as Enda says, who are just sitting there and in badly need of a win in the next 2 weeks that just might change the course of their season. Yeah,
I think Tyrone will be fine. I mean, we've spoken about the Errigal players. I know the two Canavans, and we all know the importance that they will bring to the table in terms of what they'll deliver for Tyrone up front. Obviously, Joe Goose and in and around midfield is massive, but I think Petey Hart is a huge figure to come back in. Just experience, like there's a lot. No, look, at Tyrone aren't an inexperienced team, but like, look, I thought Peter Hart in that club final, just what a display. I think he may not be a 70, 80 minute man anymore, but just a presence in the dressing room, I think he will settle things back down. I think it'll be very important to get him back in. And I think there's nothing that Tyrone relish more than Kerry coming to town. And I think if there was any fixture that Tyrone would, be licking their lips at, is Healy Park and playing the Kingdom. And I think that's in some ways nearly the perfect fixture for them to have next, because we've seen it before where where Tyrone's season would be a bit stuttery, would be a bit stop-start, and you're sort of wondering what's going on, and all of a sudden, Kerry arrive, or they travel to Kerry, and it's just something switches, and they just love the side of that jersey, and I think it could be the little ignition for them to push on. I wouldn't be surprised if the Aragall lads were back in the fold, possibly not starting, but you would have. I think this is definitely the week to certainly see Dara and Rory if they were fit and ready.
I think it was interesting, Matty Donnelly's comments about the old habits of the controlled play and sort of Tyrone needing to change those habits. And I think that Mayo Tyrone game was the worst game for me that I watched, certainly over the weekend. It was really slow. I think a higher energy game suits Tyrone. I don't think they've played it a lot over the past number of years, but that really high intensity game, certainly their 2021 All Ireland was built, their semi final and final performances that year was just the old Tyrone of a really high intensity game. I think the modern game, the new rule changes, that's where the game is at. I think that's what you're seeing. Donegal, Armagh, you're seeing teams play that way, and I think it suits them. Galway are going a slightly different direction. It suits them too. But I think for throwing that higher energy game, and as Matty Donnelly was alluding to, that will take a wee bit of a changing up of the way they have been playing this last while, and that takes time. But certainly Kerry coming to town is one of those fixtures that the Tyrone psyche is strange, but that there might just get the energy into the boys' legs that they need to really start playing the new game.
Yeah. Okay, two last very quick things to touch on. One, Rory, is yes, Galway are trying to play a new game and it does seem to be suiting them, but when they're in control of a game, they need to learn to close it out. They need to just be able to go, hey lads, pull up the handbrake here, we're winning this game. And they need to be able to do that if they think they're going to win an All Ireland.
I wouldn't be happy if I was Park Joyce getting on that bus. I mean, they were the better side. They gave the initiative back. I mean, how many times have Galway been caught now with this 3-up? And of course, like I thought Derry looked very dead, very flat, and Galway were by far the better side. And all of a sudden they get caught with a 3-up. Shane McGuigan elects to kick a 2-pointer, and suddenly a whole injection of belief starts coursing through Derry's veins. Then they get caught with a delayed kick-out later on. Now, I know people will argue that delayed kick-out thing or that time clock on that hasn't been communicated properly, and what is the actual rule here? Is it something that's a notional 20 seconds or is it an actual 20 seconds? It's all very grey. But I definitely do believe that Galway handed the initiative to Derry in a way that would infuriate me as a manager. I think, thing for Galway for me, I still believe pound for pound, they have the best 15 footballers. But there's always been a streakiness in Galway, that they could cut you to ribbons if they're in the mood. But they just have these moments of where they just, I don't know whether they switch off, whether it's concentration, whether it's complacency, I don't know. Like if Galway put together a 70-minute performance, I don't think anybody lives with them because they've so much quality all over the field. But they can't seem to do that, and it gives teams chances against them. And it's possibly why 2 All-Ireland finals, 2 defeats, last year's All-Ireland final, no one can convince me that they shouldn't have won that game. And they didn't. And, like we saw little traces of that. It's a league game in February. You wouldn't be getting too carried away. But still, some of the traits that I think dogged them will definitely have Joyce going, lads, for God's sake.
Yeah, I agree. And I genuinely do think that Rory's right in saying the skill, the talent, everything that they have, that's never in question. It's just if they can consistently do it. And they've proven to us that the consistency has actually been a problem.
Yeah, but that's not as big a slight as maybe it seems, because consistency is just about the toughest thing to get to in the team.
Yeah.
If anything, the fact that their game management and their ability to really, really control a game is limited is probably okay in the modern game, because I think that ability to defend leads is really, really reduced. We haven't really seen any team do that in a great manner over the league so far. I think the fact that you've 11 up, that you can't pack your defence, that kickouts are much more a 50-50 affair, where previously you could pack your defence. If an opposition eventually got a shot off, you were pretty much almost 90% guaranteed possession from your own kick out, and away on you went again, and you could use your keeper and you could maintain possession that way. It was so difficult for an opposition to try and wrangle back control of the game, whereas at the minute, an opposition know you've only 11 defenders, so they can overload that and get at you. And then the kick out goes on a tee and it goes 50-50 again, and away you go again, and you've got the greater scoring potential of the 2-point arc. So that ability to manage games, I think, is significantly reduced. I think Galway, personnel-wise, Galway are very, very strong. They have
strong
depth that has been built over a number of years. They've had setbacks and heartaches. Trust me, those lessons are hard learned. Trust me, the lesson from Celtic Park there is hard learned, but you cannot buy lessons like that. You are far better. Take lessons, take punishment like that. The lads will know immediately, and it won't happen again.
Yeah.
So that they are invaluable for me. I suppose the bigger thing of that, and I thought it a few times over the weekend, and not to go back to the rules again, but the 50 that punishment for a incidental catch of
it's savage.
A man back to 21-yard free, the lack of ability to communicate that to everybody in the ground, the lack of ability to communicate the 20-second thing, now that we're becoming more knowledgeable that is a thing. Who's timing that? Surely the refs, if the refs are timing that as well, from the moment the ball's struck or the ball goes dead to suddenly 20 seconds there on that while they're watching everything else.
Can I ask you, Enda, if you're a manager, intercounty or club, but maybe more so intercounty, because you would assume a higher level of, at intercounty, you would assume a higher level of game smarts. When you're setting up, we'll say in relation to your 3-up, do you just empower the players to say, look, make sure that we have 3-up all the time? I'm not going to designate 11, 12 and 13 or 12, 13 and 14. I'm just going to trust that there's a maturity and that there's a level of cop on so that you can work it out yourselves. Or do you say, right, we're definitely not getting caught here, and numbers 12, 13 and 14, you are our 3, you do not drift back? Like, what do you do?
No, I don't think you can have that, because if a defender or a midfielder or somebody like that has made a 100-meter run, possibly on the back of having tracked back, tackled, suddenly there's a turnover ball and suddenly you launch like some of them Donegal players did, and suddenly you launch from 21-yard line to the far end of the pitch. You're not in a position then to track back, and if you do make it back over the half-back line, you do not have the energy in your legs for high-quality tackling. So there will be a flux to those 3-up situations. In terms of how teams communicate that, I think that'll have been spoken about in depth. I think it'll be the rearmost man. So if a goalkeeper is responsible for communicating to his defenders when he wants somebody to sit back or push, and he's sitting at the back of that, all controlling that, I think it'll be the furthest forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whenever he's seeing the other team attacking, he'll be shouting, number 2, number 3, or whoever it is, you're number 3, you can't go. And he'll have to be very clear, very aggressive on that calls, because it doesn't matter whether you're a forward or not. If I'm tracking somebody and somebody's a key danger, horsing out on a counter-attack into that defence, I can't be checking over my shoulder and putting on the brakes thinking, oh, am I the third man or not? Because as soon as I do that, the fella's gained another 5-10 metres and I ain't catching that up again. So if you're a player and you've spotted a offensive threat that you have to track or tackle down, you have to go. It is up to the players behind you to have communicated something or other, and to have put the brakes on somebody else. But when you're in that position, you have to go. What I'm seeing a wee bit at the minute is certain forwards want to be the man that's not having to go back. So they're putting the brakes on a wee bit early, and suddenly their defender's gone and they're sort of looking around pretending, well, I'm looking to see, am I the third man? I think that's a wee bit of bluffing, and I think there'll be a few harsh video analysis sessions. I think it was forwards that loved these new rules and thought, never have to track back again.
No more running.
Yeah.
I think at times it is all hands on deck.
Yeah. Right. Well, look, we'll come back for a full coaching special at some stage. We don't have time to get into Division 2, but Roscommon look like they are absolutely flying, lads. And if we are looking at a Division 2 team who are going to be in the shake-up, it certainly looks like it might be them. We'll come back to them later in the week because we'll be looking ahead to all the weekend's fixtures when we come back on Thursday. But for the moment, we'll leave it there. Enda, thanks a million for being with us. And to everybody else, have a great week and we will chat to you on Thursday.
Lead by a point, and there's the whistle, it's over.